Of course, I realized there was a measure of danger. Obviously, I faced the possibility of not returning when first I considered going. But once faced and settled, there really wasn't any good reason to refer to it again.
The quest for adventure has been a powerful motivation for centuries. Without the insatiable curiosity of people like Marco Polo and Christopher Columbus, we would still perceive the world as flat. Thor Heyerdahl's modern-day reconstructions of journeys of the past showed that exploration on the high seas began in the earliest days of civilization, but it wasn't only the far horizons of the oceans that presented a challenge. Humanity has always coveted the secret of flight. The genius of the Renaissance, Leonardo da Vinci, wrestled with the mystery as early as the 16th century and devised a number of elaborate prototypes. But the first liftoff was by a hot air balloon, constructed by the Montgolfier brothers in the 1780s. At the same time, their compatriots, Dr. Charles and the Robert brothers, were experimenting with the first hydrogen balloon. The pursuit of the dream of flight eventually killed Otto Lilienthal, but not before he'd made over 2,000 flights in his ingenious gliders. His work was continued by the Wright brothers in America. Considered to be the founders of the aviation industry, they were the first to put a petrol engine in an aeroplane. They made their first flight in 1903. The quest for adventure has always had its more bizarre travelers. The year is 1910, the location the Eiffel Tower. The result, one of the less successful early flights. But more conventional challenges were met as aviators pushed the limits ever further. Louis Blériot was the first to cross the English Channel in 1909. One of the best-known flyers was Charles Lindbergh, who made the first non-stop solo flight across the Atlantic in 1927. He was mobbed on his arrival in Paris and became a folk hero overnight. By then, flying wasn't just about records and discovery. The Schneider Trophy for seaplanes was a major international sporting contest in those early years. And it wasn't just the men who had all the fun. Baroness de la Roche was the first woman to receive a pilot's license in 1910. After World War I, female aviators were all the rage. Hélène Boucher broke several speed records. She worked as a test pilot, but after her death in a crash, her female successors were kept away from the cutting edge. But it didn't stop American Amelia Earhart, who played an active part in efforts to open aviation to women. She also died while flying when her plane disappeared in the Pacific in 1937. As the seas were crossed and the coastlines mapped, the next great challenge was the exploration of the uncharted interiors. The high mountains, the great rivers, the impenetrable forests, and the frozen wastes. By the 20th century, the only major areas still unexplored were the Arctic and the Antarctic. American Robert Peary on the left conquered the North Pole in 1909. Norwegian Roald Amundsen, inspired by the success of his compatriot Fridtjof Nansen in Greenland, was determined to conquer the South Pole. But the Norwegian expedition had a competitor, Englishman Robert Falcon Scott. National and personal pride were at stake. The race was on. Amundsen used dog teams to pull his sleds, but Scott tried ponies and motor sledges. The motor sledges didn't work, the ponies had to be shot, and Scott's party were left to haul their own sleds. Amundsen was first to the pole on December the 14th, 1911. A month later, Scott also reached the pole to find Amundsen had beaten him to the prize. On the return journey, Scott and his party perished. Amundsen returned to Norway in triumph.
You appreciate that it's very easy to die, and you have to arrange your life to cope with that reality.
As for the accidents and tragedies, the circus goes on. There's no room for tears.
Gentlemen, start your engines!
You see a race car go around a racetrack and you hear that noise and you smell the rubber and you smell the burning oil. And when those motors crank up at the start of a race, if your blood doesn't start pumping, there's something wrong with you.
For many seeking challenge and adventure, speed is the passion, especially speed on wheels. They seek the charge of adrenaline, pumped by the death-defying speeds which excite both drivers and spectators alike. At the world's great races like Le Mans, the mass fix reaches its high. High speed, glamour and danger, just for the thrill of it. And speed means danger, real danger.
When I was doing it, the statistics apparently stated that you had a 2 out of 3 chance of being killed if you lasted 5 years in the business.
I think that Formula One drivers have one responsibility. It was the same for me when I was driving, and that responsibility is to stay alive.
I knew that my job was very dangerous, and I realized I could be killed doing it. But I had such a passion for it, I believed it could never happen to me.
The potential of the wheel as a vehicle for sport began with the invention of the Draisine in 1816 by Baron Karl de Drey de Saarbrun. A more recognizable machine was developed by Pierre Michaud and his son Ernest in their Paris factory in 1861. The Velocipede became hugely popular, and before long, town to town and track races were organized. Even earlier, in 1769, the idea of a four-wheel drive had germinated. Nicolas Joseph Cugnot designed a full-scale steam-powered monster for the French army. But the seed fell on stony ground until the development of the internal combustion engine. In 1890, Germany's Carl Benz was selling horseless carriages to the more well-heeled public. Henry Ford was selling his much more affordable Model T only 18 years later. From the moment the first car was built, the desire was to go faster, to break records, and to race them. While the first Indianapolis 500 took place in America, Europe held its first town-to-town events and witnessed the birth of the great races like Le Mans, the Mille Miglia, and the beginnings of the Grand Prix circuit. The speedsters were soon risking their lives in search of records. On Daytona Beach in 1928, Indy 500 winner Frank Lockhart was one of the first fatalities. The early 30s in Europe were dominated by Italians like Tazio Nuvolari and Achille Vazzi, driving Alfa Romeos. Their mantle then passed to the Germans, Bernd Rosemeyer and Rudolf Caracciola in their Mercedes-Benz. The German team's success was used by the Nazi propaganda machine to glorify Adolf Hitler and the Third Reich. On the other side of the Atlantic, Louis Meyer was the rising star, and in 1936 became the first driver to win the Indy 500 3 times. Motorcycling also had its heroes. The Isle of Man TT, which started in 1907, is motorcycle racing at its most fearless. Britain has produced some of the world's best riders who've inscribed their names several times on the Tourist Trophy. But Italy's Giacomo Agostini is regarded as the greatest motorcyclist of them all. 15 times world champion, 122 Grand Prix wins, and TT winner on 10 occasions. But after his friend Gilberto Pallotti was killed in 1972, he refused to ride in the TT again, and was vociferous in demanding the race lose its world championship status, which was finally removed in 1976.
I think it's a very difficult course, very dangerous, an awful course. The dark side of the Tourist Trophy was the complete lack of safety. You couldn't afford to make any mistake.
Despite the loss of its championship status, the event is not in decline. It's turned into the world's largest bike festival, attended by 50,000 enthusiasts each year. The TT has claimed the lives of 160 riders in its history. But in the macho world of grease and leather, if you choose not to ride the course, they say it's because you're not man enough. Memorial Day in the USA, and the culmination of a carnival of motorsport, the Indianapolis 500. More than 250,000 fans flocked to the raceway from all over the world to watch the event that's at the heart of American motor racing. Drivers reached 240 miles an hour on the revered 2.5-mile oval, the oldest surviving racetrack in the world. The razzmatazz, the danger of the phenomenally fast straights, and the precipitous 9-degree banking have made the Brickyard legendary. They call the Indy 500 the driver's Everest, where speed is everything and winning is the only thing. But of all the great heroes of motorsport, one man is held in the highest esteem.
Over the course of his career, he established himself as the greatest driver in the history of motor racing.
There is still an incredible aura about him, and for a sportsman to have this 30 years after his retirement, well, it's just fabulous to be remembered like that.
In 1936, Juan Manuel Fangio made his racing debut in a borrowed taxi. From a poor working-class family, he rejected the temptations of street corner society to concentrate on racing.
I don't know what I would have done if I'd not taken up racing. Perhaps my life might have been shorter if I'd continued with some bad experiences, along a path where one should never go. That's why I love this profession so much.
His triumphs in Europe after the war established him as the greatest driver of them all. Behind all the glamour and the thrills, tragedy is never far away in motorsport. Le Mans in 1955 was the sport's darkest hour. The Mercedes driver and 83 spectators were killed. Astonishingly, the race wasn't stopped. But Mercedes withdrew its team and pulled out of racing for over 30 years. In 1957, the famous Mille Miglia in Italy was abandoned forever after a crash which killed 2 drivers, a co-driver, and 11 spectators. In 1973, Swede Savage lost his life following this horrific crash in the Indy 500. The drivers know the risks, but theirs is a unique philosophy.
But you know, motor racing accidents don't hurt. The violence of the accident, the speed of the accident, you're so consumed doing what you're trying to do to retrieve the car, to avoid the accident at all. You're living with that. There's no long period of waiting for the bang.
Austria's Niki Lauda had his fearful accident in the 1976 German Grand Prix at the Nürburgring.
It was always a question of finding the right combination to spread out the risk. I always tried to give my best at the right moment, but hold back when the risk wasn't worth it, and therefore to survive Formula One. Thank God I survived it.
We looked at death in a different way. We were doing the thing that we most wanted to do, and if we died doing it, it was no loss to us that life was taken.
If you die doing it, thank God you died doing the thing you love doing.
But despite the danger, or maybe because of it, motorsport still carries a glamorous image, especially at events like the Monaco Grand Prix, one of the world's great gatherings, a place to be seen, an occasion not to be missed. But is motorsport still the same? Is it now all about money? Where has all the romance gone?
It's changed. I remember going to Monaco and you drive round and there was a girl with pale pink lipstick at Oscar's bar, and every time I go past, I'd blow her a kiss. You know, well, this doesn't sort of happen now. Because I think it's just different, it's a different sport probably for different people.
I don't know what I think of today's bunch. Don't know what I think about being whisked off on a helicopter minutes after the race is over, and not going to victory banquets and all that. I really don't know. It's all very different, and I don't think that they really have the passion for the sporting side of it that we were able to have.
Some of the glossy bodywork of motorsport may be a little tarnished from excessive financial embellishment, but for the drivers, the risk remains the same, and their courage no less than that of the speedsters of the past.
Skiing is a battle against yourself, always to the frontiers of the impossible. But most of all, it must give you pleasure. It's not a duty, it's a joy.
It's not the danger, it's the difficulty, because what I like in skiing is the challenge, is being pushed as far as I can go and seeing what I can do at the very limit.
It's the high speed. When you can do it perfectly, it's almost like floating.
As a mode of transport on snow and ice, skiing has been around for a long time. The earliest record from a cave in Norway is over 4,000 years old. Norway is also the home of skiing as a sport, going back to at least the middle of the 19th century, and of the man regarded as the father of skiing. As a child, Sondre Norheim was fond of leaping off the roof of his parents' home, not an activity to be encouraged in the young. But ski jumping had to start somewhere. When he was older, working as a farmer, he redesigned his simple skis and improved their bindings to allow the skier greater control. Norheim also developed the Telemark and Christiana turns, improving technique and helping develop skiing for recreation and for sport. The first recorded ski race had taken place in 1843. By the 20th century, the idea of winter fun on snow and ice was well established. Enormous crowds attended the Holmenkollen, Norway's winter sport festival, started in 1892. Ski jumping has always played a central part in the Nordic ski tradition, and although the Holmenkollen is where it all began, it's now at the Springertournee, or Four Hills competition in Austria and Germany, that the king of ski jumping is crowned. It requires a special kind of courage to jump off what looks like the edge of the world at speeds of over 75 miles an hour. It's said that in order to get the feel for jumping, you have to start by the age of 8, perhaps before you're old enough to understand the risk. It was the export of Norheim's redesigned skis by Scandinavian visitors to the Alps and the arrival of the pleasure-seeking middle classes, particularly the British, that brought about the development of the alpine ski tradition. Today, skiing is about winning, but it still has its romantic heroes, even for the great champions.
There were a lot of champions around when I was a kid, but one stands out in particular, Ingemar Stenmark.
I haven't seen too many perfect skiers, but there are a few. Gustav Turney, Ingemar Stenmark, Jean-Claude Killy, and Karl Schranz.
To keep pace with the world's best on the plummeting slopes of the World Cup circuit demands nerves of steel and outstanding strength and stamina. As the techniques and technology improve, the speeds get faster and the danger becomes ever greater. The Cresta Run in St Moritz, Switzerland, has seen men tobogganing down its tunnel of ice since 1884. Now the techniques of the related sports of luge and bobsleigh have become so refined and the speed so high that the bobbers and lugers have to be sure they're well prepared, even to meet their maker.
You pull a lot of G's, it throws you to the bottom of the sled and you really can't come up until you're out of the curve. You know, I believe in God and I think He's going to take care of me. So I think when you worry about wiping out and getting injured, that's when it happens.
Of all the winter disciplines, alpine or Nordic, the most admired, the blue ribbon of skiing, is the downhill.
It's in the downhill that the risks are greatest.
You have to go beyond the limits. In downhill, there are always 5 or 6 people who give more than 100%. They either achieve what they want and go very fast, or they crash.
The most notorious and challenging of all the downhill courses is found glowering above the Austrian town of Kitzbühel, the infamous Hahnenkamm.
When I saw the piste for the first time, I said, no, I won't go down it. It's too dangerous. They're all crazy.
It's the classic downhill race, the one you have to win if you want to be remembered.
Of all the courses, the Hahnenkamm is the hardest. Probably the most difficult, and certainly the most dangerous downhill of them all.
But for the courageous skier prepared to accept the challenge, there awaits the ultimate thrill, that of the downhill racer.